I have a question. What do you guys think is a good first woodworking project? People probably will say a cutting board or a coffee table. But I have something else. Cabinet and drawer face. So, if you've been looking at your old cabinet drawer face and go,
I can do that too. How hard is it to make my own cabinet face? Heck, I'll make a video about it.
we are rebuilding this kitchen's cabinet and drawer faces. Since we are replacing the existing faces, we start by measuring and labeling each one of the face. There are a lot of videos about cabinet face build out there, but none of them mention upfront that building a whole kitchen cabinet faces is really tedious. So right now is a good time for some reality check. As you measure, count how many faces you're gonna make. At this point, if you want to bail, go ahead. I'm not gonna judge. I counted and I gotta make 33 faces. It's a lot, but I'll do it for YouTube. If you guys still here after the reality check, let's head to my shop.
We're back at my shop. If this is your first project, welcome to the wonderful world of woodworking. A place where you will save money and spend all those savings in tools, which will start right now. Let's talk about the tools that we need for this project. The tool list that you will need for this project is going to be quite substantial, but here's the good news. You probably can buy all of them for under $1,000 new, even cheaper if you buy them used. And another good news is that these tools will cover 90% of future woodworking projects that you want to do. So I think it's a good investment. Maybe I should make a video about whether woodworking as a hobby is worth it. Anyways, these are the first tools that you want to buy. Drill and driver. Also get yourself a jigsaw. Get a miter saw, like this one. And also you will need a table saw. Not exactly this one, I'm going to put my recommendation for beginners up here. You also need router, not the networking kind, the woodworking kind. And you will also need some small jigs that I will mention throughout the video. Now that you know all the tools that you need, let's talk about materials. Basically, you need two things: plywood and dimensional lumber. For plywood, what you want to do is you want to buy cabinet grade plywood. Do not go to Home Depot and buy construction grade plywood. What I recommend, go to Google, search for plywood dealer near you, and they should be able to tell you what's good.
Oh, by the way, this is pro tip if you drive small car. Cut the plywood into 3 pieces of 32 by 48 inches. It should fit at the back of small SUV or the back seat of small sedan.
For dimensional lumber, you want a 1x3 lumber. My recommendation, you can go to Home Depot and buy either clear pine or prime pine if you're on a budget. But if you want to spend a little bit more money, this is my favorite. Buy a 1x3 poplar. It's gonna be a little bit more expensive, but you'll get better result with it. What I don't recommend, do not buy a 1x3 construction grade lumber. And here's why. I have a piece of that. This is an 8 feet 1x3 construction grade lumber. It is straight and it's pretty nice, but it took me a while to find one that's even this nice. So if you need a lot of them for cabinet grade, it will take you a long time.
Another tip for non-truck owner. You can fit 8 feet lumber through the pass-through from your trunk to your cabin. It's a small hole, but it can fit quite a bit of wood.
All right, we're ready to start the project. First of all, let's do some measurement so you know how much materials to buy. Let's talk dimension. We are going to make shaker style cabinet door and flat panel drawer faces. A shaker style cabinet door consists of a frame that consists of 2 longer pieces and 2 shorter pieces. We are going to fill the middle here with 1/4-inch plywood. A flat panel drawer face is just 3/4-inch plywood. The 2 long pieces will be the height of your cabinet face, and the 2 short pieces will be the width of your cabinet face minus 2 times the lumber width. For the plywood, full sheet of plywood is 4 feet by 8 feet. You can take the total of your cabinet width, and for every 8 feet, you need around half sheet of plywood. So that's for your 1/4-inch plywood. And for your drawer face, for every 8 feet width of your drawer width, you need about a quarter sheet of plywood. So that's for your 3/4 inch plywood. Of course, this is estimation and you can be over or under, but it's a good starting point. I always cut my project into 1 to 2 hour smaller subsessions to fit it in my busy schedule. And for the first one, we're going to cut the dimensional lumber to its length for the frame.
Before cutting the lumber to size, you want to cut just a tip to clean up and square the edges. After you remove the tip, you want to measure the length from the good end that you just cut and mark it. In my case, I need 29 3/4. This is my poor man's stop block setup. That wood that I clamped to my workbench is 29 3/4 inches away from the blade. So when I need to make repeated cuts, I just need to slide the wood up to that stop block.
These are the two that I cut just now using the stop block method. They're the same size. So now I just need to do this a lot more times. Time-lapse magic.
That took a couple of hours, 2 shirts, and a bucket of ice water to keep myself hydrated. But here are all the frame, and here are the leftovers. A lot of woodworkers have the tendency to hoard leftover lumber. So let me show you guys what to do with these small pieces. I think sometimes it's just not worth it to be a wood hoarder. But if you guys find this video fun so far, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It's gonna be worth it, and I'll greatly appreciate it. Thank you!
Now we gotta assemble all of these. There are a lot of different joints to assemble the frame, but I think this is the most beginner friendly while still looking pretty good. Dowels. Now technically, you can just use a drill bit, a lot of patience, and swearing like a sailor to make a dowel joint. But don't do that to yourself. Get yourself a dowel jig, like this one.
For the dowel, you want its diameter to be half of the thickness of the material. Since our material is 3/4 inch, we need 3/8 inch dowel. You also want to get a 10mm Brad point drill bit. Now I don't know who Brad is, but his pointy bit is great at drilling holes into hardwood. The hole from this drill bit will be bigger than the dowel. Just trust me on this, it'll make sense when we assemble the frame. I start by drilling the shorter pieces. I align the jig with the tip of the piece. I also wedge a board of same thickness across the jig to ensure equal pressure across the piece. Watch closely as I flip the board and the direction of the jig. This is to make sure that the holes are aligned on both sides. Drilling the longer pieces is a lot more straightforward. Pick a side and then align the jig on one edge and drill the holes on each edge across from one another. Let's repeat the process through the rest of the frame pieces. I counted and I made a total of 352 holes. It's more tiring than anything else. I'm taking a break. Let's assemble the frame now. Let me show you guys how it's done. To assemble the frame, you will need dowels, wood glue, and glue brush because I hate getting my fingers sticky, a pair of clamps. You can get this from Harbor Freight, or a roll of painter's tape. Remember when I told you guys to drill 10mm holes while using smaller 3/8 inch dowel? This is why. Slightly bigger holes give you a bit of room to wiggle the frame to make it as flush as possible. You can clamp the frame using, well, clamps. Or if you're cheap, you can use painter's tape. Seriously though, do yourself a favor and buy the clamps. It's better.
Next up, we're going to cut rabbet in the inside of the frame. A rabbet is basically a ledge where we will drop the plywood into, like this. To cut a rabbet, you will need the router and a rabbeting bit. It looks like this. Before cutting the rabbet, you want to set the depth of the router bit. I do it on a scrap wood, like this. I did a lot of them.
Once you set up the router depth, you just need to cut away. Router can be intimidating for first timer, but it's one of my favorite tools. Just go slow. Keep in mind that for inside cut, you want to go clockwise, like this.
Alright, the table saw is finally coming out to play. Let's cut some plywood to fill in this space.
We are going to use relative dimensioning for this part. What it means is that instead of measuring the size of the hole, I will just mark where I need to cut and then I will test fit them until I get good fit. Here's for the rib cut. And here's for the cross cut. For this one, I'm going to use this nice fancy miter gauge that I review in another video. Check it out. I think we got the perfect fit for this frame. Well, not really, since the rabbet is rounded from the router bit and our plywood is rectangular. To solve this, I just found something around the shop that matched the round over. I found this cap and it fit perfectly. I traced the shape of the plywood and then cut it using jigsaw. Now it fits perfectly. Next, you just need to glue the plywood into the frame. And since we can't use traditional clamp, you can just use Newtonian gravity clamp, like this. Or if you're lazy like me and you have brad nailer, you can just use that. Looks good. Now we can make everything.
These cabinet faces are ready for finishing, but we'll do that later. Since we have the table saw out, we're going to cut the drawer face. We need to cut this 3/4 inch plywood to the size of the drawer face. After that, we'll cover the unfinished edge with iron-on edge banding. This process can be pretty tedious, but I'm going to show you guys how to do this a little bit more efficiently to save time.
Most likely you will have multiple drawers with the same height. In my case, all my drawers are 6 1/8 inches high, so I will cut my plywood to this size. Instead of cross-cutting the plywood to size immediately, you want to edge band the long side of the plywood first. Iron-on edge banding is pretty simple. As the name suggests, you iron on the edge banding into the plywood. Hopefully, you are a functioning adult who own an iron. Here I'm using painter's tape to keep the edge band on temporarily. Start ironing. Go slow and apply consistent pressure. And next, I cut the leftover edge banding using a 3D printed tool, but you can buy them too. I'll put a link on the description. And they will look like this. The short end is still exposed plywood, but the long end is edge banded. Now we cross cut all of them to size. And of course, to finish it off, you edge band the remaining exposed edges. This method saves you time because by edge bending the long edges first, you technically edge bend multiple faces at once.
Now that we've finished the drawer face and cabinet faces, we are going to break the edges of all these faces. Right now, all these cabinet faces have really sharp edges. So we want to break the edges using a sanding block. I'm going to show you guys how it's done. You want to get the sanding block and put on 120 grit sandpaper. Now it should feel nice to the touch.
And now we do it on all of them.
The next part is optional, but it adds extra nice touch to this project, and that is adding round over to the cabinet face. And here are the things that you need. A router, and get yourself a nice round over bit. Now in terms of the size of the router bit and how much you want to cut, it's all preference. I like smaller round over bit because I like smaller round over. Now you just need to start cutting. We are going to go counterclockwise outside. It's really subtle, but this is what I prefer. Now let's do it to all of them. So this is one of the original cabinet face. For the next step, we're going to take off this hardware and then make the holes in the new cabinet face. We're going to need a cracked cabinet jig, a ruler, and a drill. First, take off the original hardware hinge. Next, you want to measure the distance from this edge to the hole and the other edge to the hole. Set up the jig to the distance from one edge to the hole, which is 6 millimeters.
Here I lightly mark the cabinet face with pencil in preparation of sanding. Now, I don't know why a lot of YouTubers really hate sanding. I guess that's because it's really shaky for your hands and it's really dusty. But I found that if you buy a good sander and a good dust extractor, it makes it a lot more enjoyable. So this is something that I recommend not to cheap out on. I kinda cheap out on the finishing though. I use polyurethane because it's accessible and beginner friendly. Also, if you guys notice, I use Chinese take-up chopstick to stir the can and cheap foam brush to apply the polyurethane.
This cabinet face is done and ready to be installed. However, I'm going to end the video right here without the installation. That's mainly because of two things. Number one, this video is getting too long, and I think installation should be pretty straightforward anyways, since you guys only need to put the cabinet hinge and then hang it back onto the original cabinet. Number two, I'm actually running out of time to finish this project, and recording it will just take so much longer. But if you guys watch the video all the way to the end and you guys think I need to make a full cabinet build video, let me know. I might do it one day. But for now, bye!